maybe you could start by giving us an update on, because you've not only been writing these books, but you've been an educator for many, many years. What you've seen from your early days as an educator up till today, as far as changes in how U.S. history is being taught in schools.
Well, it's changed dramatically. I know as a student myself, when I was in elementary school, history was taught pretty much the traditional, boring way. Okay, there are two parts to history. It's a record of past events, but that's not the most important part of history. The most important part of history is that it is stories of people and what they did and what they felt. History is more than political history or government. What we were taught were basically, we had a textbook and you read the textbook and you assimilated the facts and then you regurgitated the facts. That somehow changed a bit. When you got to high school, you studied Western civilization to give you a more global perspective. And you studied American history. You also studied civics, which now isn't really taught at all. When I first started teaching, history was a more important part of the curriculum, although it was much diminished from the time when I was a young student. And now it's just kind of an add-on. Since Common Core, teachers spend all of their time teaching to the test. And most of that is teaching math and teaching English. And in an attempt to bring all students up to an equal level, we kind of dumb down education for everyone. And we're back to really regurgitating facts. So you teach to that test and you attempt to get students to meet a certain standard. But in the meantime, everything else is pretty much ignored. They're not thought to be researchers, and they're just learning what they need to know to pass the test. So they're not developing critical thinking skills, which is a big part of studying history.
And why isn't history part of Common Core?
Well, technically, history is taught in what they classify as social studies. And social studies takes in history, geography, social science, and civics is supposed to be included in that, but there's very, very little attention paid to it. And over time, the amount of time that a teacher spends in the curriculum with social studies has been pushed down. And, it's only a couple of hours a week, if that. And depending on the school system and depending on the needs of the students, if the students are second language students, if there are a lot of special needs students, they spend more and more time teaching to the test. I know in one of my last positions before I retired, I was doing team teaching in a public school, and I was the teacher that went in to address students that had some special needs, and also I did some tutoring after school. So after school was additional tutoring for the students who they felt would have difficulty meeting the standards. So not only did they spend many hours during the school day teaching to the test, but they spent time after school teaching to the test. So I think it really turns kids off to learning.
Mm-hmm. Well, according to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, a recent study showed that only 18% of American high school kids were proficient in U.S. history.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all.
And the ramifications of that can be obvious. I mean, if you don't understand the underpinnings of America, and the importance of the founding of America and what America was based upon, then you've got no foundation for judging anything that's going on today.
And you've got no foundation for wanting to preserve it either.
Right.
So it's just a shame, and it's something that's been, it's a cumulative effect over time, and unfortunately, the circumstances that have all coalesced at this point in time just exacerbate the problem, because uh, we're trying to destroy history because of singular points of view. Well, one of the things you need to understand when studying history is you don't study history in isolation. All right. So when you want to study a particular thing in history, you choose a subject or a topic to study. And then with that topic, you have to learn how to assess the evidence. All right, because history is based on facts. It's not based on opinion. It's not based on bias. It's based on facts. And today's students don't know how to research. They think that if they go online on the internet, the first thing they find, well, that's the answer. Here's the answer to my problem. They don't understand that you have to go back to the time to look at the primary sources, uh, diaries, journals, photographs. What was the person thinking? Who was this person being influenced by? What was the context in which? What other things were going on while this event was happening? What connections did it have to the other events and the other people? And how is it communicated? Because one big thing that's changed history is modern technology. Because people change, people evolve in the course of human history. I mean, if you go back to the beginning of mankind, how did we communicate? We communicated by oral tradition. Okay, so when you wanted to have something remembered, parents, grandparents told their children what they wanted them to remember, what was important. Then as language evolved, they began to write things down, whether it be on cave paintings or monuments. And they began to kind of memorialize history. But nowadays, we have instant communication, and that changes the way history is driven. And when people hear something, they immediately form an opinion. Everybody wants to have an opinion. All right. Everybody wants to say what they think is correct, and they don't assess the evidence. They don't look at the circumstances. They don't look at the context, the people, the influences. They look at the content, the subject that they're thinking about, and then they jump right to the conclusions. And the conclusions are very often not based on the evidence. So you have the media involved, and the media is not delivering news. For the most part, I think of my father, and I remember as a young child watching my father every night. He'd watch the 6 o'clock news. He'd listen to Walter Cronkite. And when Walter Cronkite finished his broadcast, he would always say, and that's the way it is. What he delivered was the news. He didn't deliver a group of people's opinions on the news. He delivered the facts, and he let those who listened to him figure out what to do with those facts. So now we have opinion panels. We have experts who say what they think is correct, and then people listen to the experts. But the media is often invested in delivering the news a certain way. So if you watch the same clip on television on different channels, you might see very different things because a lot of it winds up on the cutting room floor. Okay, so they're interested in delivering an opinion. And this is what people want nowadays. They want things delivered fast and conveniently, and then they talk to their friends, and if their friends heard the same thing they did, then they're probably aligned with similar opinions. And those that don't and have a different opinion are very often say, well, you just don't understand the facts. So there's an inherent bias with everything.
So this trend that you've seen in the media, where it's no longer just reporting the facts, that it's reporting the facts along with opinion at the same time. And I don't think there's any question that that's what we see, whether it be the cable news networks or whether it be the 6 o'clock news. You're getting opinion at the same time that the facts are being delivered to you. They're being delivered in a way that either supports one side or the other. Are you seeing that same thing happening with the teaching of history then? That history is not being taught as just the facts, that it's being taught with a certain political bent to it?
To a large extent, yeah. Well, we know that on the university level, more than 90% of the professors have a liberal tendency, a liberal bias. I mean, they identify themselves as liberals. A lot of colleges implement required courses that are aligned with their values. Like some colleges require a social justice course. They don't require studying history per se. When I went to college, there were requirements. I studied Western civilization. I studied American history. There was a core curriculum that emphasized many different areas of learning. That isn't the case now. So students can pick and choose, take whatever they want. They're not required to have any kind of basic foundation.
But you have heard about a social justice course
requirement? Oh, there are. I just heard the other day that in one of the schools in the California university system is going to require students to take the social justice.
Wow, that's incredible. That's basically take a class to be indoctrinated into progressivism.
Right, right.